Let's move on to another subject, which is intriguing. You know, as some football followers will know, there are actually two World Cups in the global football firmament. One, of course, being the World Cup. The other being the Club World Cup, which has always trailed far behind, Ryan. But I wonder if the addition of a large sum of money, it's been confirmed this week. To the winner, $125 million prize money and loads of money for everybody else as well. I wonder if that will make the difference of for a lot of people, somewhat indifferent Club World Cup.
For the players, probably not, I'd imagine. I'm not entirely sure. I imagine for some clubs it will, potentially for all clubs, especially with if you want to look at it from a Eurocentric point of view, which, although this is a global competition, it still seems very, very heavily weighted in favour of Europe, which is one of my main issues with the expansion, actually. But my honest answer is I don't know. I don't know enough about this tournament still, because I'm so intrigued as to how it's going to work, how much interest there is going to be in it, like anecdotally and literally coverage wise, how much we're going to see if we're not covering it. I'm personally not covering it for work for the summer. I might check a couple of games, but that kind of feels a little bit like, like when Marvel put these other series up that you don't really want to check, but you have to watch one or two episodes, otherwise you miss something really important down the line. It kind of feels a bit like that, where you're checking it because you have to. Personally, now I know I've kind of sidestepped your question a little bit, but I think it's quite important context about this tournament as a whole. That I feel like FIFA, and this is maybe an acknowledgement that they realise that it doesn't carry the weight yet, and therefore the money has to be the thing that drives it. FIFA and potentially UEFA as well, a lot of federations, they're quite good at highlighting problems, actually. I think they're quite good at highlighting potential problems in the football landscape, and are equally as dreadful at applying solutions to those problems. For example, I think that, there was an issue about maybe the Club World Cup, about how we could introduce a few more global teams and make that feel like a bit more of a global experience, maybe take away the European, buys to pass certain rounds or whatever. I feel like what they've stumbled on, again, is just, it's maybe not what I would have gone with. And I think that's why they've had to focus so much on the money side of it, because they realize that now packing out the calendar, I mean, this is stuff that you guys have talked about, we've all talked about a million times, but the only way to potentially quieten down the noise, because there has been a little bit more from players, there have been some from clubs as well, and even managers, is to be like, maybe get I think this prize money then makes the executive level of the clubs do a lot of their work for them in convincing the players and the staff that they should go.
It's genius, really. You would think, Andy, and yet you wonder what difference, because I think Ryan hit upon a really important thing. The success of the Club World Cup kind of depends upon us, the football fans, as much as the journalists and everybody else. And even though in the past we've seen sporting tournaments throw huge amounts of money to attract people, it hasn't always worked, or it's worked for a time and then people move on. If you're a cricketing fan, you remember Kerry Packer, for example. Yeah. But I wonder, though, I do wonder if in this case the money has already made a difference in the way that Ryan alluded to there in terms of the clubs, and will be the defining point here, because it's a huge amount of money, isn't it? For a tournament of this size, it's virtually unheard of.
Yeah, and I think really this is the moment where I guess the organisers expect the clubs to put pressure on the players and corral some interest from the fans. And really, I think, as Ryan touched on again, I think one of the reasons that we're maybe not all focused on it yet is I don't even think it's to do with the scheduling, really, and the unbearable demands on the players, because I think as a fan culture, as I said before. We don't care about that as much as we should. Not just because the players are fellow human beings and everyone needs a holiday at some point, but because inevitably it leads to a point where we as fans pay through TV subscriptions and tickets for an inferior product, because we are paying a lot of the time to see players who are absolutely cooked, and we're not getting a discount for it, are we? You know, we're not getting a discount from our TV subscriptions or from match tickets or anything like that. And I think the increasing sense that football is entertainment, where the existence of product and the presence of product rather than the actual quality of it, it seems to be the most important thing for the people running the sport. And that is a concern. And I think we'll come back to that in a minute. And really, if this tournament is shit in terms of quality, nothing will save it. You know, nothing will save it at all. But ultimately, you're right, Dotun, in that for the Club World Cup to work, or the new format of the Club World Cup to work, what it needs is for the players and the fans to imbue it with some sense of meaning. And that can only be done over time, but there has to be a start to that. If the players and the fans don't care about it, it's simply not happening. I think the way that it's been approached from a funding perspective, and we're seeing that even more now, and obviously the money is kind of coming from Saudi with the DAZN TV deal. It's the fact that if you look at previous Saudi efforts to break open sporting quandaries, they've just used money to break open sporting quandaries. So you can look at Live Golf, you can look at boxing. They're the two most obvious examples. In boxing, for example, you know, you've had a history where it's impossible to make fights between the best boxers due to the schism and the fragmentation of boxing control boards, and, you know, boxers and their entourages protecting what they see as their own best interests and all those sort of things. And then the Saudi money just comes in and goes, look, whatever it takes, we'll just put however much money on the table it takes to make this happen. And really, I guess that is what's happening with the Club World Cup now. You know, to give this meaning, to make sure that you're all fully invested, how much money do we have to put on the table? If we have to put a little bit more on and the table starts to creak, okay, we can do that. You know, there's no limit, and they can carry on doing that. I guess the question really, Ryan, is when it comes to, as we said, the actual quality of the games, how much can the players physically and emotionally give? Because I think, you know, the Nations League has again brought this to mind, because we've got like the full club season, we've got the Champions League final, like days after you've got the Final Four of the Nations League, and then a few days after that you've got the Club World Cup. I mean, I like football, but come on, you know, everyone needs a day off, right?
Well, I think this is the interesting thing about what's happened over the last few years, especially post-COVID. I thought COVID would have been a time for a lot of football governing bodies to maybe take stock a bit and be like, all right, okay, is this actually the way we want to go? Because, you know, we're told quite often that, you know, football is a business now, and these are some very smart people who make, you know, business decisions and stuff like that. But there is such a thing as like oversaturation of your product, right? Or your you know, football isn't a streamer. It's not a streaming platform where you just flood it full of content. It's a sport still, and it has to remain a sport at its core. And the people who are central to generating that product, if you want, in quote marks, are the players. And if you run them into the ground, they're not going to be able to deliver the product that this money is supposed to justify. But also, I think what has happened over the last couple of years, especially, is that I think people at the organizational federation level of the game or whatever are underestimating the impact that it is having on fans. And actually that fans, I'm not sure that the demand is fully there for this. They are, and if you look at the moves that they've been doing, there is always another reason why they're doing it, right? There's always another reason, and that's fine. And there might be elements of truth within that, but the sole reason is that the main reason has been this kind of weird thing between UEFA and FIFA jostling for power and dominance. Really, that's been the main thing. And when you have an organisation that its literal tagline is "for the good of the game," essentially just not really being that arsed about that, all about aligning itself with power. Musa on Stadio the other day mentioned it as just seeing football as a constant ATM. You have a problem, and it might sound like, oh, here we go, people moaning about too much football, but it is a problem long term, because I feel like that if it takes, like Andy said, it takes time for meaning to be applied to new things in football. And unfortunately, I think when you flood the schedule with stuff, you don't have that time, actually, because it's only a couple of weeks before something else is back. So you have to be amazing from the jump, otherwise you could just be forgotten very, very quickly.
And the thing that I find absolutely remarkable is just that every idea, and I guess this is a sort of nod back to the Super League idea when we go back a couple of years as well, the announcement of that. The fact that something that involves such an enormous amount of potential revenue is so poorly planned. And I think we can look at the Club World Cup like this in a way, in terms of branding and projection, they're really late. In terms of TV deal, they're really late. And obviously Infantino had a little bit of a panic about that at one point. And even you mentioned COVID before, like the unexpected side effects of this. So, for example, players that are going to run out of contract during the tournament. I mean, you had Samuel Dahl who's on loan at Benfica from Roma at the moment. They've said he's going to be able to extend that, mainly I think because they're expected to buy him long term. But that's one of the minor things that's sorted out. There's this incredible story in Brazil at the moment that Thiago Almada, who's been brilliant in the last couple of World Cup games for Argentina in this international window, and has been in great form for Lyon at the moment. He, of course, has been loaned to Lyon for free by Botafogo, and he will complete a permanent move to Lyon next summer, the summer coming up. But there's strong talk in Brazil that he's going to be taken back by his parent club to play the Club World Cup for Botafogo before completing that full permanent move to Lyon, which is just unbelievable. Now, if we're talking about going back to the same footballers and flogging them, as Musa said, like an ATM, like something that never runs out, I think that's the best example of that. And it's also just an example of how. Because his loan contract goes to the end of June. So they're going to have to find a way to cancel that, to re-register it. Honestly, I don't understand how it's going to work. And contractually, there are going to be loads of other little blips like this that they're going to have to sort out, and that they'll just end up completely fudging it, obviously, won't they? And yeah.
Do you think that it'll end up being, because the thing I really worry about is that no one ever really seems to be, I can't imagine a board meeting, say at FIFA, where someone's like, guys, do you think maybe there's a bit too much of this? Or do you think maybe we should, I want to know if there are people within that kind of room who are just like, Gianni, I think that, do we really want to go? I know that the reason that we haven't got anything together for this is because you've highlighted this summer as the only summer that you can do it for the 4 years, and you're just rushing to do it. So no one's. It's very, very rare, or it's very, very difficult to then dial this stuff back. So I wonder, in the contract thing is going to be one of the most interesting things, because when you start getting legal, shit gets very real very quick in football.
Yeah,
and I wonder whether this might just be speculation, but if they are going to continue to fill the calendar as much as possible, whether you do see a slight change or adaptation of football contracts, and it becomes maybe a little bit more like cricket, where you can do it almost, you have a parent club, but for example, if your club isn't playing, use Arsenal as an example. I'm an Arsenal fan. They're not in the Club World Cup, thank God. That defeat of Bayern in the Champions League last year was a miracle. If someone wanted to sign an Arsenal player for the summer to go and play in the Club World Cup, I wonder if it becomes almost like, if someone has their IPL contract, or then they have their county cricket contract or their international contract. It's whatever it is, it doesn't sound too fun, but we'll see, I guess.
You make it sound as if there's such a thing with regards to the Club World Cup as player power. Now, let me give you a quick example of the player power in regards to this. This is Harry Kane, the England captain. It's a great quote, but it's one side of a quote. So there are two sides of the coin. So bear with me. With regards to the Club World Cup, he says, look, there are arguments from the club's point of view to generate more money. And there's also a player welfare point that we've been discussing where there's only so much you can do without more injuries. I don't think the players are listened to that much, if I'm totally honest. But, Andy, there's always a but. Then he was asked whether, given the choice, he would go to the Club World Cup. Well, yes, absolutely, he replied. And I wonder whether, you touched on the fact earlier on that, both of you actually, that the clubs are the ones who will apply the pressure. And I wonder whether actually in that respect, when it's the clubs that have got their signatures, they will speak out and say enough is enough, or whether they'll just roll with the punches.
Well, with Kane, I suppose you don't really need to apply that much pressure, do you? Because even if he was like on one leg, really, and dragging the other one behind him,
he'd want to play anyway.
He'd still play. But that quote is just incredible, really. I mean, I know it's just a bit, other football tournaments are available, sort of thing. I don't know if he's saying, going back to Ryan's point, that, well, it might be Iron Fist, but what if it turns out to be Daredevil?
Exactly.
Do I want to miss it?
Send me back out there. Can I just touch on one thing though? Because I think that on the player power thing, I think it's gonna take a large group of players to convince another large group of players to convince more players to all agree on some action. Too many players try and do this stuff on their own and they get shot down, or it's too easy for people just to ignore individual player quotes saying, hey, listen, the schedule's back, because there have been so many of those over the last few years. There needs to be some collective action, and I personally would fully support it, because I feel like we know that they're paid a very, very substantial amount of money. That doesn't mean that they should have to do, or they should. That doesn't mean that they should. The football season should be 365 days a year. But again, there is one thing I do want to kind of just like highlight again, that I feel like some of this, I think the positives about the Club World Cup all come from outside of Europe.
Agreed.
Fans of clubs who've from non-UEFA confederations, some of them are really looking forward to seeing their teams play against some European giants, right? And there are, or Messi and Inter Miami. There's some really, and there again, this is what I was saying before, that like FIFA and UEFA, whenever they make changes like this, there's always a little bit. They're like, oh yeah, actually, there are a couple of I'm really interested in seeing how, if there's a massive upset or a really historic result where, I don't know, like a non-UEFA club who's maybe not fancied beats a giant, for example, or whatever like that, then there are going to be those things there. But again, going back to what I said at the very beginning, I do think that is a problem, that global football, club football is a bit too Eurocentric, especially financially. But was this the answer? Was there a way that we could have found a better solution? If
you're a Chelsea fan or a Man City fan or a Real Madrid fan, you will watch some of this, won't you? No?
I'm maybe, yeah, probably. I'm trying to put myself in Arsenal fandom, and I think I honestly don't know. I know that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I think it really depends on what the summer's looking like, actually.